This just in, we are now cutting to a live rendition of me watching Mob Psycho 100 for the very first time. What is the story, Ron Burgundy?
I'm in a glass case of emotion!
More at 5. Hello and welcome again to Oldtaku New Tricks, where today I'm going to be sorting through some complicated thoughts. Thanks to my lovely Patreon supporters, I was treated to 2 seasons of the show that I should have caught the first time around back in 2016, but better late than never. That show being Mob Psycho 100, a, for now, 25-episode series based on the webcomic by One Punch Man creator, One, which might also appear on Oldtaku New Tricks someday. But I doubt that I would have such a visceral, raw feeling watching it like I had with Mob Psycho. This was one series that completely blindsided me with its themes, characters, and plot, and it left me in that weird, numbing state you find yourself in when you don't know how you feel because you felt the entire spectrum of emotions in the time it takes to microwave a burrito. So for this episode, I feel like I have to say my piece, not so much for all of you, but for myself. Spoilers ahoy! The series began for me on a shaky note as the familiar setting of a middle school boy with special powers felt like ground that's been retread to the point of mulch. Said boy is the titular Mob, or Shigeo Kageyama, a powerful psychic that can give the Dark Phoenix a run for her money.
If I can save them, I don't care what happens to the ones attacking me!
Of course, such power is being housed in a frail, timid vessel. Ever the wallflower, Mob seeks help and understanding with his teenage troubles from those around him, particularly from his mentor and boss, Arataka Reagan.
When you reach my level, you get so crazy strong you end up melting everyone around you during a simple exorcism. That's why I ask you to take care of the weaker ones.
Who is also a con man pretending to be a psychic. Not to tip my hand too early or anything, but a lot of my consternation with the show revolves around Reagan and Mob's relationship. Together, they investigate spiritual hauntings and other such phenomena in order to dispel evil spirits and make a buck or two. Or one.
Here, your pay for the day.
Oh, thank you.
Right up front, this whole spiritual angle that the show takes is actually the least interesting thing about the show as a whole. I get it from a shonen perspective that such a concept would entail fighting ghosts and other psychics and spectacular battles, and I will admit that the animation in these fight scenes are imaginative and downright impressive both in terms of execution and technique, but it's not what I took away when the credits roll. To me, the fight scenes, while they're pretty to look at, are just a vehicle for the show to use to get to the actual central conflict of the plot. That conflict being, what do I do with all these feels?
You'll never laugh together, cry together, or be moved emotionally in any way. You'll be alone forever.
Mob's tumultuous emotive state is inexorably tied to his massive psychic powers, and thus he learned to mute his feelings so that he doesn't hurt anyone. But that can only work for so long, especially when he's being tormented and used by nearly everyone around him.
We believed in you, Kageyama! We knew you'd be back! Now, hurry up and sign this club admission form!
Your powers are meant to be used. Not doing so would be a waste. Working for me gives you the opportunity to help other people.
The show frames Mob going ballistic and using his powers to defeat other psychics and spirits as a failure on Mob's part to control himself, which is why I feel there's a disconnect between seasons 1 and 2. Season 1 was all about keeping Mob from reaching that 100% state of emotion, with the climactic finale being Mob's realization that there's more than one way to handle yourself and your situation.
When things go south, it's okay to run away and save yourself!
For a show that seems to center around finding another viable option besides fighting, Season 2 sure had a lot of fighting. As the series rolled on, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was losing the plot, and by the end of the second season, I was well and truly disappointed. Not so much by the fight, or the fact that there was a fight at all, but by the circumstances that led up to it. If there is one plot trick that the show just abuses to the point of absurdity, it's the fake-out tragedy. We all know the trope of the protagonist losing his cool and turning into an uncontrollable, ravenous beast when he witnesses his loved one suffering, which is completely understandable, but when you take that trope and pair with the themes and virtues of self-control and seizing violence through communication, it basically kneecaps itself. You need Mob to go psycho to show why going psycho is such a bad idea, and one way to do that is to endanger his loved ones. Alright, fair enough, but if you're gonna do it, then do it. What the show winds up doing instead is make it seem like his loved ones are suffering, but hey, they're alright, guys! Which is cheap enough the first time it happens, let alone the second, third, fourth, fifth, etc.
No, impossible. Hey, don't scare me like that. I thought you actually cut me for a second.
To say nothing of the fact that this cheapens the writing and creates this consequence-free environment where nothing has any gravity, so there goes any sense of drama, it also cheapens the plot's resolution. It's hard to see the validity of taking the hard way and talking things out if the only reason we got to that point is thanks in part to Mob's family looking like they were killed but weren't, psych your mind. Or the fact that it only looked like Reagan was killed twice. It's just so silly to see the lengths this show will go to portray these violent scenes, only for it to immediately hit the brakes and continue its themes of talking it out.
Come, nobody holds out on me.
Kaito!
Don't worry, nobody dies in this story. They just get really big boo-boos. What did I tell you?
Ultimately, it's a failure of its genre and the trappings thereof. The show needed hyper-powered fight scenes because that's what people tune into shonen anime for, but Mob Psycho wants to have its cake and eat it too. As a result, it just pisses on its own feet when it comes to its themes. Even if you wanted to make the argument that the show wanted to portray the very real possibility of not being able to talk things out, it still winds up being unsatisfying because it doesn't follow through. I suppose you could chalk this all up to the needs of the genre infringing upon the needs of the story, but this also goes hand in hand with another problem I have with the anime. Simply put, I feel like the detours into comedy, again while fitting well within the confines of the genre, does little for me at best. The simple visual gags and over-the-top expressions were good in that it helped change up the pace of the story, but it did a great disservice toward Reagan and Mob. That Reagan is a fake psychic that is lying to all the people that come into his office for his services, and to Mob himself, may all be played for laughs, but it's still a bastard thing for him to do. Yeah, he got his karmic comeuppance by being embarrassed on national television, you know, for a hot minute, until Mob saved his sorry butt and demonstrated psychic powers during a press conference. And yes, it's hinted that Mob always knew that Reagan was a liar, but he believed him a good person despite that. And yes, it truly does seem that Reagan has Mob's best interest at heart and does want to teach him the value and power of words. He still took advantage of a child who sought him out for help, all for money. And that's a rotten thing to do. What's more egregious is that I don't think the show truly understands this, because if it did, there wouldn't be an about-face on Reagan's national embarrassment, and there wouldn't be some lame attempt to justify what he did by him just wanting to be somebody. In the end, it was just played for comedy that a real psychic was being taught by a fake, which I guess could have been funny if the psychic wasn't a kid. A kid that really and truly needed help. It's just so frustrating for me because I find myself beyond the pale with Reagan, but if there's any kind of justice for him, it would completely upend the plot. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. I've been going on about how the show works against itself for a while now, but I did mention the fact that I should have seen it sooner for a reason. Because despite my deep-rooted problems, I do really and truly like this show. Maybe even love it. And it all has to do with Mob himself. He is easily the most relatable, most sympathetic, superpowered character I've ever come across. It's hard not to see Mob's story play out and not feel for him one way or the other, from his inability to speak up for himself when he's bullied or being taken advantage of, to his frustrations with remaining true to his word with Reagan and his family.
His powerlessness born from overwhelming contradictions, and the feeling he would never be able to conquer himself.
The show accomplishes the seemingly impossible task of making an audience feel sorry for a near omnipotent being of unfathomable cosmic power. You just can't help but root for Mob as he navigates himself through a chaotic life of evil spirits, despot psychics, and middle school. Coupled together with his emotional and developmental issues, he truly is a sympathetic character that you just want to see evolve and grow and be happy. The lessons that he learns are important, not only to himself, but also to the audience, considering the target demographic. The fact that these lessons are being taught from a imperfect source is lamentable, but also kind of appropriate. Much like how Reagan is an imperfect person driven by greed and a tragic lack of self-awareness.
They're using you, trust me. They just don't want to lose their room, their budget, and they're pointless after school time, judging from what their club sounds like to me.
What he does have to teach Mob is exactly what he needed to hear. The difference being that the faults of the show are not there by design, surely, but that doesn't mean what it has to say isn't important, or more pressingly, vital. I really could have used this show growing up, but I'm glad beyond all words that I finally did get to watch it, even with all my hang-ups. But what about all of you? What did you think of Mob Psycho 100?